Here for Charlotte County Sheriff's Department Marine Patrol. Okay, I'm Sean Paxton. I'll be your moderator for the discussion here, question and answer session. I'm going to go ahead and grab the first question here. Let's see what we can come up with. Okay, this handwriting is neater than mine, so we're off to a good start. Okay, so why isn't the S12 canal open? There is a filtration system in place already. How do we get water south where the Everglades desperately needs it? Who would like to take that question?
All right. Repeat the question one more time.
Why isn't the S12 canal open? There's a filtration system in place already. How do we get the water south where the Everglades needs it desperately?
Because they're not meeting the Miccosukee tribe's 10 parts per billion standards. The federal government and the state government, even with their plans to approve and sign off on House Bill, Senate Bill 10, which is the reservoir plan for the south of Lake Okeechobee. First of all, it's not big enough. Second of all, the federal government and state government has already admitted that they cannot meet those standards or will not meet those standards.
Okay, next question. And if anybody, I have the unofficial authority here, if anybody would like to add to any of the answers or chime in on that, please feel free to do so.
Thanks, John.
Okay. How can Lake O be blamed for a red tide that was in Sarasota, Venice area for over a month before it was as far south as Boca Grande? The dominant current flows south. Okay, and then the one final part of this is ask questions, don't just accept. Not sure what that means, but who would like to take that on? Apologies if that mic is not already
on. There we go. All right. If anybody doesn't know me, my name is Bruce Nathan. I am a candidate for governor. I'm a 22-year medical practitioner, 9-year military veteran, honorably discharged captain in the United States Army. One of the reasons that I sit here today in front of you is I live on Martin County on the East Coast. When I got here 18 years ago, I did see that the newspaper said Lake Okeechobee, most polluted lake in the country. I got to tell you, coming from New York, it made my heart go to my stomach. But I got to tell you very clearly, because I have 6 children, is one of the reasons I sit in front of you right now. Because we need to take it back. So let me give the answer to that, and I'll go into more things later on. You can always ask more questions. The problem with Lake Okeechobee is that not only should it go south, and it can go south, and we get fooled by the federal government, by people thinking that we let the federal government do what they're doing, and they don't have to. Under the laws of our Constitution, and I'm a constitutionalist, we do not need to do that. We need to take our state back, and we need to do what's right for our state, and not what's right for the federal government. We have a lot of money here that's been put in the wrong directions, and that's one of the big problems, because I am anti-corruption, anti-waste, and very pro-environment. So here's the answer to that, final answer to that question. We send the water south, but at the same time, we did buy that land back in 2014. We actually voted for it and never got bought. Why did it ever get bought? Because of the corruption that goes on. Yes, and I'll be very clear with you right now. As a Republican, I'm a Republican, I'm not voting for Rick Scott. I'm not. Very clear. Because that corruption is just out of control. So the answer to the question is, the water has to go south. It does have to get filtrated. And we have enough money in the budget, believe it or not, it's already been put there for $1.9 billion to make a state-of-the-art filtration system to go with what John said over there, to get it down to 10 parts per billion, so it can go south and the tribe will be okay with that. And that's what has to happen. Also, the locks will get closed east and west. That's the answer to the question. The lock, yeah, I just answered it right now. The lock.
Okay, for the interest of time, folks, I'm gonna.
The locks. The
It's a
lots-
natural flow. The natural flow of the Gulf flows south. It's physically impossible.
Okay, so did you write the question, sir? Okay.
The locks will be closed east and west. That's the bottom line. That's what needs to happen for the water south. That's what has to
How
happen.
do you start something north?
Okay, so, First Nathan, if you don't mind,
Checking 1, 2, 3.
let's open this up. We want to, just be as pithy as
Yeah,
possible.
I was just trying to clarify.
Thank you.
We do not think that red tide is caused by Lake Okeechobee. What we think,
He said it was caused by the
it may have just been a mispronounced. What I'm trying to say is just add to people for the educational side is simply that red tide is a very, very, very natural occurrence. The way you're talking about those water flows, again, that's common sense, guys. What we are getting at is it may possibly be tied together as far as one may aid the other. When the cyanobacteria comes out, dies into the ocean, we may end up finding that it's actually feeding the red tide with those nitrates and phosphates.
Okay, Captain Van Helder would like to just add something here to that. Oh, sorry, hang on one second. Let me.
Can you hear me all right? We do have a problem. The predominant longshore drift is north to south, but we do have currents that run from south to north frequently, especially on big moon tides. I don't believe personally that the Lake Okeechobee is a huge factor all the time in our red tides, but it can be an influencing factor in contributing nutrients. That's my opinion.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. Going to dig deep here.
Thank you.
Wildlife, effects on wildlife. A lot of that happening, obviously. So, has anyone taken a camera and looked at the Gulf floor to access the amount of dead sea life?
Yeah, we all have. We've all seen it.
Anybody done that? Okay,
On the bottom, the seafloor.
briefly, if you will.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Next week, actually, won't give the day, but nonetheless, I'm going with a professional, fishing company that has discovered that it's not just our coast, folks, that it travels, 200 miles down. This is some 40 miles out in width. So we're going out with, professional fishermen with professional camera and underwater camera to prove that the red tide is now in federal waters, and the federal government now has a part to play in this as well.
Okay, so to clarify, it has not been done, at least by anyone on the panel yet, and that's something that may happen in the future, just to be certain. Okay. What have you seen in the effects of wildlife other than fish and other species like grouper? Now, I'm going to go ahead and just respectfully, if I might ask Dr. Robin Jenkins to answer that question with the Peace River Wildlife Center. They do deal with a lot of wildlife there.
Hello. We do get some shorebirds and different species occasionally that have eaten the fish that are affected by the red tide. We've been very lucky lately. We haven't seen too many. Charlotte Harbor is fairly clear of the red tide. We do get some birds that are coming in from Boca and Manasota Key. These birds are affected by the neurotoxins. They're basically, it paralyzes them. It starts with they don't blink well, they can't hold their heads up. Eventually they get to a point where they are in the water and they drown, or they can't fly, they can't walk, they can't feed themselves. So depending on how early we can get them to a facility to start flushing these toxins out of their system and treat them symptomatically and try to support them through this, till the toxins are out of their system. We've had fairly good success at being able to release some of the ones that come in early. some of the ones that come in, when they're too far gone, we haven't had really great success with. And like I said, we haven't had too many problems recently. Earlier on in this bloom, February, January, we had a lot of scops coming through that were migrating. And I think the migrating birds have a harder time with this because they're already very depleted. And the juvenile birds, I think they're stupid enough to eat the dead fish, and the adult birds know not to, or their immune systems aren't that great yet. So this time of year, for us, it's not a huge problem with the birds, but cyclically it is, and with the migratory birds coming down soon, it's going to be devastating for them as they're trying to migrate through here.
Like that also domestic animals can be affected. If you see the foam on the beach, the foam is highly concentrated in the neurotoxins. And if dogs walk along and lick the foam or lick the fish, or if you have children, don't let them play in the foam because it's highly concentrated with toxins. And then the other marine organisms, of course, dolphins, manatees, sea turtles especially, because they eat things that accumulate the toxin. And then, of course, crabs and just about everything.
Thank you for adding to that. Okay, I'll grab, yes.
And real quick, like the live bottom, the corals and rocks and sponges and the sea fans and everything, if it's real concentrated, it can kill that too.
Thank you. Okay, question for Mo specifically. You stated that we need to be careful of how we control, in quotes, red tide because it is a natural event. Shouldn't this perception also be applied to the flow of water from Lake O, but the rest of the state of Florida? And that's from Michelle Bissell.
Yes, most definitely. I mean, we're talking about conservation and sustainability. The red tide's always out in the Gulf, and we have to be careful dumping chemicals and things on it because you'll be affecting the ecosystem in general. When it gets into a canal and it's totally anoxic and dead fish, that's no longer natural. And that's where we need to do whatever we can. Now what's coming down the Clusatchie River with cyanobacteria also is not natural. And that's where there's a lot of things that can be done and must be done to stop that from coming to our coastal areas.
Thank you. You got something to add, John?
Yeah, and like all of what he said is true, and the high nutrient levels and phosphorus levels are exacerbating. It's basically like gasoline fueling the red tide, and I'm glad he said that. But where are these high nutrients and phosphorus levels coming from? They're coming from irresponsible agriculture for the most part, right? And my question is, if Mo is dispensing this kind of, information that it's high in nutrients and high in phosphorus that's blooming it, then my question to Mo is, why are they also taking contributions from mosaic and sugar industry?
Okay, I'm gonna step in here just to keep things on track. We've got a lot of questions. John, I appreciate your input there, but it did add a separate question. We're trying to keep questions coming from the audience to Mo as opposed to amongst the panelists. However, in this case,
Yeah, but once again, we seem to have gotten your attention. That's great, thank you. Well, of course, you've heard, fake news, and I'm very disappointed that people are saying that we're taking money from the sugar from the sugar industry. We have not taken any money from the sugar industry.
come on, folks, let's let him answer the question, okay?
Would you give me a chance to finish, please? I know
Please.
you all know more than I do, and I understand that. I'm okay, but yes, we have had some funding from Mosaic. Some of it was for our turtle run. Some of it was because we look at the science. We don't look at who's funding us. And it was not for any red tide work. It was for a turtle run, and it was for part of our education program. And some time ago, there was some that was for a fisheries program. But please understand, moat scientists look at the science. No matter who funds us, we tell them up front, we report it as the data is done. And it's time for you to stop saying that moat is taking money and that we're in the industry and agricultural pocket. We are not. That is a bald-faced lie, and I'm tired of it.
Hey guys, I'd like you guys to know, when I said that I was a former crop consultant, I used to be a scientist for Monsanto. Guess whose fertilizer I used? Mosaic. Guess who's trying to help you? No, it's one of those things when I go to a restaurant, even if I think the steak's bad, the last person I complain about is the waiter. So I trust what my friend over here is saying with Mo. You know, as far as we're looking at a steak that we don't even know what it is, guys. You don't know the difference. I don't know the difference as an algae scientist between well done, medium, and raw on this kind of steak. You know, so we're all trying to work together. That's the most important thing, is working together.
And, you know, I thank you for Garrett. He's a great guy down there, you know. He's my hero, that's for sure. You know, but for me, I particularly can't support an organization that takes money from Mosaic, who is actually adding to the problem. I'm sorry.
Okay, so once again, to reiterate my comments earlier, out of respect for you, the audience, we want to keep things going because we've got a lot of questions here. That was an extended dialogue there. We appreciate everyone's input. And Captain Van Hubbard, just one final brief comment, if you will.
Their opinion of where this pollution is coming from, but there's a whole lot of it that's coming from our dead-end canals, from our intercoastal waterways, from our septic tanks. This is a whole lot of everybody here's problem, and we are all contributing. If you've got a green grass yard, you're contributing to our problem. Thank you.
If I may, of course, I'm knowledgeable enough that we have to clean up our own backyard before we point fingers at anybody else. So, you know, we can do our part too. I'm not disagreeing with the man, but what I'm disagreeing with, you're talking about special interest to basically take off our...
No.
Thank you.
All right, thank you,
Annual
John.
reports. Look it up.
Okay, I first heard about brown tide today that killed marine life. Where is this brown tide in the Gulf? If brown and red tide join together, it sounds like that would be catastrophic. Maybe someone that hasn't taken that question yet.
Everybody's looking at the algae guy. Now, brown algae is that, what do we call that, Tarantulacidus alboris, or whatever cool Latin name we named that one with a T word that I don't bother remembering. Yeah, there you go. See? Now, this organism, we've been finding a lot of it around the Indian River. I'm not too familiar myself as far as with the exact situations that we're facing right now in Florida. I'm familiar with brown tide. We did get a couple manatee that I hear the autopsy reports came back positive for that toxin, not brevetoxin from the red tide. Now, what we scientists are certainly doing is trying to understand if any of these are kind of linked together, if we might be feeding one into another, or what we can at least do to keep it stopped. Ozone, for example, I think that's great for the canals. When we're talking about big bodies of water, I can't help but to think with the common sense part that we're in this situation because of chemicals. So I don't think it's time to use another chemical to fix it. When you make the same, you can't fix the mistake with the same style of thinking that you made when you made the mistake. So I think that if we were to go about it in an even more natural way, with, I'm sure Moat Marine and anybody else would agree, just because when you talk about Lake Okeechobee, for example, 750 square miles, You can't ozone that, you know, and that's why we're not trying to. We're focused on canals. But yes, that's when something like duckweed can come into play, all other kinds of things. But what we understand about the brown tide, there's even less information than the red tide. There's 54 algae scientists on the planet, so it's not like they're all having big slumber parties, getting together, talking all the time. It's a rough life out there. There's only 3 of them in America. Too bad you guys are stuck with me, huh? But we're trying to get on top of it, guys. I promise you that, because the biggest fear is that if these two collide, what that could mean to our environment. And the last thing that we want is more death, trust me.
So I'm John Ryan. I'm a water chemist mostly for Sarasota County, but I've been listening, and I've lived in Florida 30 years, so I've seen some red tide blooms, and I hate this one. This one's killing me. But I've been to some harmful algal bloom conferences, and what the experts have told me, and Rich can corroborate this, is that there are harmful algal bloom problems all over the planet. There are different species, but they are increasing all around the planet. At the same time, there's increased nutrient pollution all over the planet. We're part of a big problem. What's weird about that is all those species are different. They're really different, and they have different problems. Some of them are really grievous, like red tide, but some of them take your memory away permanently. It's crazy. It's a complex thing. But what makes common sense to me is we have to cut back on nutrient pollution. That's it's the big sources. Everybody said, who likes the discharge from Lake Okeechobee? Raise your hand. Who's in favor of that? Okay, so we don't have to really argue about like somebody likes it. We all hate it. Do we like phosphate pollution from phosphate mining? No. It's a business. There are issues there. But we also, and Garrett's talked about this a lot, I'm in Sarasota County. We don't have phosphate mining in the coastal area. We don't have, all the pollution comes from us. There's no industry there. We have septic tanks, we have wastewater, we have stormwater. That's where I work. Stormwater's a problem. And you know where it comes from? Us. Because we live in waterproof buildings. We have waterproof cars and driveways. All that water has to go downhill, and it carries pollution with it. So it's partly too much water, and it's partly dirty water. And so part of this is us, part of it is working together to fix the big problems, which is more than a single person can do. But harmful algal blooms are a thing, and they're a bad thing. And the solution is partly in our hands, working together or working separately. That's where I see it.
Thank you both on that. We've got a couple of short questions here. We'll see if we can kind of bang on a few of these. Is there any way to stop the water releases from Lake Okeechobee now, today? What was that, John?
Turn off the rain.
As I hear it pouring on the roof right now, yeah.
Well, we could,
Oh, John, I'm sorry, he was... Okay, you can add in a moment.
okay, well, we
Try to
could,
keep it quick.
hire a lawyer, and we could slap an injunction and close the gates right then and there. What they're doing is violating the, Species and Protection Act, so we can vessel through that lawsuit and have an injunction slapped on them immediately once it hits the, court, and the judge slaps an injunction on them, and the discharge is stopped that day. But what they'll do is, of course, they'll bury us in litigation. So we need community efforts on, a lawsuit to continue and make sure our language is right. We've lost many of lawsuits when it comes to this because of loss of correct language.
So an option, but not right now today, nonetheless. That's the crux of the situation. I said it's an option, but not right now today.
Yeah,
John, you
but
wanted to add something to that?
I'll add something real quick. You have to hire a governor that's willing to close the locks left and right. That's what you got to do. You have to have somebody who's health conscious. That's what you got to do. Bottom line, that's the solution.
I'd like to add to that, please. Actually, I don't think you want to shut off the water because the estuary needs to stay brackish. And the Caloosahatchee River brings a lot of fresh water to the Charlotte Harbor, and Lake Okeechobee at certain times of the year is an important source. What you need is clean water coming down the rivers to the estuaries.
Okay, I've got a question that was signed here by Laura Ross. And Laura, for time, I'm going to jump right to the question part of this. A lot of good comments in here and sentiments. Speaking of now, what are we going to do now? Not what we plan on doing 10 years from now. We have the perfect opportunity tonight to make a real effort in moving forward and working together to find a solution. So what would that right now, not 10 years from now, be?
Duckweed.
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 I see a new hashtag.
Just clean it.
And you know, Garrett can't be any more correct. Because guess what? The reality is the discharges are not going to stop from the east to the west. As much as we want it, and as much as we demand it, the reality is they're not going to stop. So Garrett's idea is exactly what you want to get behind.
How do we get you the duckweed? How do we get you the duckweed?
Money and permit. Come in and spray it anyway, so.
Well, we're obviously going to stop that one. Most of the old timers realize, hey, that's that stuff we've been spraying glyphosate all over, huh?
Money and permit.
Okay, so I've got one here. If you recognize this question, if you wrote it, I want to be clear on this acronym. Why are the EEC, and I'm certain it's not the Englewood Event Center, burying the dead marine life under the sand?
Burying.
Let's spread around this.
Burying.
Anybody from a municipality that may like to speak on that?
What I've been told was that they were just burying to keep the smell down until they could actually get more dump trucks back there to carry them away. I haven't ever heard of anybody burying marine life and keeping it buried. It was a matter of trying to keep the smell down and, you know, just basically lessen the panic too for kids that are walking by. I commend the people that would bury it for a short time. I haven't heard of anyone ever leaving it buried, though. We all know better than that.
Okay.
Real quick, Sarasota County and many areas this year, I've never seen it on the scale that it's going on now, is we have crews out picking up dead fish, and Manatee County's doing it, and a lot of communities are doing it, and I applaud them. I think, terrible job, but it's got to be good.
Yes.
It's got to take all that dead, decaying stuff out of the water, and it's expensive, and that's our money. It's our money that's being spent that way, and I think you should support it. One of the things with nutrient pollution is fish are nutrients too. We're nutrients. When you take those fish out, first of all the bacteria and decomposition is at least lessened. And the numbers are big, and you can find them online. The communities are posting how much they're pulling out. It's a lot, and it's expensive. But I think it's worth it. It's up to you to decide too.
And if I may, I'll jump in on that. Where I live on Fort Myers Beach, I live in Lee County, okay? So what they're doing with the fish there is, exactly what Garrett talked about. They're burying the fish, not only to get rid of the smell, but to present the image of tourism, okay? So now the sand is completely toxic. You can imagine down here on vacation with no signs available to warn you about this. You forget a beach towel, and you're laying on toxic dead fish below you. One more thing I want to comment on when it comes to cleanup. The governor has allocated, Lee County, $600,000 and then another $900,000 red tide cleanup. What they're doing is, vacuuming the cyanobacteria up. Number one, you don't want to disturb cyanobacteria because it spreads throughout the water column and it becomes most toxic when you disrupt it. and they're taking it, and they're actually taking it to Hendry County and deep well injecting it into the ground.
That's how you fix it.
Okay, so we're going to move on here. The HABS Task Force. An acronym I am not familiar with, so if anyone here is, grab this one. Can and should we refund and also restructure this task force, and if so, how will this help? Be specific, please.
Yeah, it's a great idea. It should be funded. You know, the science of red tide, I'm going to give this to Rich or you because you're an expert, but it's complicated. And you're not going to guess your way through it. You have to do science, and that costs money. And there has been some success and some progress, but anyway, I'll get off.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the acronym. Yes, I agree. It definitely should be reinstated, and to have the experts all talking together. We do a lot anyway, but to make it formal, yes, agreed.
Be more in agreement with that I talked about, how the HAB task force is imperative to have reinstated. You know, this is something that couldn't be more needed and evident than now. And to have it sliced away from us, we need to demand that back. You know, to not know what the HAB task force is from an ecological organization, that's a concern to me as well.
Now you do? You just learned a little bit about it?
Can I ask a question? Why is it that the activists know more about the harmful algae task force bloom than the politicians and the experts?
That's an easy answer because I'm not a politician. So I come here from on this coast, which is a little bit different from my coast on the other side. So I have to get a little bit more acclimated from one side to the other. So it's a different kind of blue-green algae on my side than it is on your side over here. So.
Okay, so we're going to move on. We're going to keep the questions coming from that direction, if at all possible, ladies and gentlemen. Is making fertilizer illegal? Question mark. A possibility. Dash nitrogen. B, a solution. Phosphorus. I'm sorry. So is making fertilizer illegal a possibility and potentially a solution to the problem?
In a lot of the coastal counties, fertilizing in the summertime in certain months during the rainy season is already illegal. And so it definitely can be done.
Who enforces it? Who enforces it? Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. A law don't
there are laws against it. It's not supposed to be available for sale in the stores right now. Don't shoot the messenger, I'm just telling you, it is already illegal.
Okay, moving along. Is it possible that dead particles or toxins from the Fort Myers area beaches can help feed the local red tide bloom? I'm assuming that means here locally.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
So that is possible. There we go. Expeditious answers and questions.
I live on Fort Myers Beach.
We have some repeat questions here. Would you like to
The water
briefly
is
add
toxic,
something?
the air is toxic, the sand is toxic.
Next question. Please explain what factors cause Gulf/ocean upswells. I read an article that said these protect our coast, M2010, but coastal upswells contribute to blooms. So this must have to do with hydrology and upwelling.
Yes, it sounds like upwelling. If you have offshore winds blowing the surface water away, the bottom water will come up to replace it along the coast. We have found out more recently that some red tides start on the bottom offshore, and when there is offshore winds, it pulls the water in, and so all of a sudden, with upwelling, you'll have a red tide bloom near the shore.
For Dr. Richard Pierce. I believe we already addressed this, but I will, as I randomly grab this question, present this to Dr. Richard Pierce. Explain the money that you, Moat in parentheses, has taken from Mosaic. How can we trust Moat when you are bought and paid for like the rest? This is from Ashley Duke. Is that correct? Okay.
Well,
Doctor?
I'm very disappointed for you to take that tact. We've taken, Mode has received funding from Mosaic, for, as I said, for the Turtle Run, for some of our education programs, and it has nothing to do with our research. Whatever research we do is based upon the actual empirical data, and as scientists, we're not advocates. We don't try to bias our information to provide information for a specific cause. We interpret it as it is.
Making contributions, you know, from Mosaic, who is directly impacting your community's issue.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question.
0.01% is what they've taken from Mosaic, if you're interested.
Are there any plans to improve the public and, I'm sorry, his mic's gone out. Captain?
0.12 of 1%.
Which is nothing. $125,000 for your Snook enhancement program. Don't lie.
I'm going to read the next question, ladies and gentlemen. Are there any plans to improve the public and private stormwater systems in ways that reduce nutrient runoff?
I'm a stormwater guy. I work for the stormwater utility. And yeah, we struggle with it. It's tough. We have a utility. It doesn't have a ton of money in it, but we built two big projects, and we're not the only ones. Lee County built a beautiful stormwater pond right downtown in Fort Myers. It's a really great location to improve water quality and reduce fresh water running into the bay. But we built a thing called the celery fields that is big. It treats a tenth of the watershed. And I'm not taking credit for it. I work there, but the Audubon, Sarasota Audubon built a nature center there. It's super popular. People love it, and it is really great. We're building another thing called the Donna Bay Project. That's to help the Venice Inlet area. Because of a watershed alteration that was done years ago, we're trying to take that water back out and purify it. And I'm not just saying Sarasota County is great. Communities do these things. Pinellas County does these kind of things. Other communities, it's tough. It's an uphill battle. You find your money, you try to get a grant, try to come up with a good project that's going to work. For the last 15 years, I've gone to the Florida Stormwater Association meetings. They're held in Fort Myers, right at Punta Rata. And every single stormwater organization in Florida, every city and county is there. They're all working on water quality. Have they fixed it? No. It's an uphill battle, and it takes support from people that you say, we're going to keep working at this. We're going to get better. We're going to work at it. But progress is being made. We're not done. We're a long way from it, but progress is being made.
We have one for Charlotte County Marine Patrol. What are the biggest impacts that you have seen during this most recent outbreak?
I would say that most definitely our boating traffic is hugely diminished. We're not having near the amount of people we're having on the water. Just the environmental impact of losing all of the wildlife that we're losing. I would say that probably is the biggest one that we're seeing, being on the water every day.
Thank you.
You just told me some stories. I'm sure they want to hear. You've been doing this for
I'm obviously everybody. I'm with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. I am a sergeant over the support services. I handle the traffic and the Marine Patrol. So I'm not on the boat every day. But I did start my law enforcement career in Florida in 1992 in the Florida Marine Patrol. And I lived in Lee County for almost 20 years. I went through several of these events, but I've never seen it this bad before. I just haven't seen the death and the destruction that this has done in this area. I know in '96 we had a horrible event. We had, I think Lee County led the state in manatee mortality and death, and it was just hard to believe. And I do agree with everybody here on the panel. I mean, it's a combination of everything. Yes, red tide is a natural occurrence, but I think we're doing a lot more harm, and we're amplifying that, and we got to find a fix for it.
Captain Van Helden, I'm going to throw this your way. It wasn't directed, but I'd like to pose this question. What are the health risks running out in a boat through Cape Brevis and cyanobacteria?
The cyanobacteria I know is dangerous, but I don't deal with that because I'm not down in Fort Myers. I have a very funny voice today, and I've had the sniffles since I took a boat ride yesterday. And I can tell you that red tide definitely can affect your health, and be careful. And the bizarre part is, everywhere I went yesterday, I never saw any signs of red tide. But when I got home, I was a mess and been sniveling since. So be careful, and be careful especially of kids and older people with immune problems.
Was the question about cyanobacteria?
What are the health risks if you're in a boat, running a boat?
Health risks of cyanobacteria obviously are, extreme. We're talking about right away it can cause liver damage, liver failure. We're talking about down the road, some 10 years from now, you'll start to suffer from neurological problems, may end up with ALS, may end up with, Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's. This is attacking our, neurological system and our nervous system to where, they don't even consider it a harmful agent in the state of Florida as they're killing us.
I'm going to go to Dr. Richard Pierce on this one. How is the Moat Scale-Up project in Boca Raton going? Or is it maybe referring to Boca Grande?
Boca Grande. Yes, well, this is a pilot study, sort of an experiment. We use ozone, as I said during the presentation, for our Marine Mammal Center. So we thought maybe ozone would be something that could be used in enclosed, restricted canals. So we just did the experiment last week, and it's working well. We scaled up from about a 5,000 gallon mammal tank to a 25,000 gallon mesocosm tank, and everything went well. So then we went to about a 650,000 gallon end of a canal, and that's a whole different world. So we learned a lot of lessons, but it looks promising. And Moat doesn't want to get into the canal cleaning business. We're doing research to prove proof of concept, and we're looking for some of the large companies that already have very large ozone production equipment, and hope to really open this up so that we can start maybe even finding some refuge areas that can be restored for some of the marine life.
Thank you. This is directed to John Ryan. What is the EPA for? Surely not doing a very good job.
So somebody doesn't like the EPA? Well, I like to be positive. So I'll tell you a story. Back in the 70s, they passed a rule, there must have been some brilliant people back there, common sense people, and they said, water should be fully functional like it always was through history. And so they passed some laws, and they're called impaired waters. You might have heard of impaired waters. Impaired waters means polluted. So if water is too much pollution in it where fish can't live in it, they can't reproduce, you can't drink it, it's polluted, it's required to be cleaned up. And so that law was passed in 1972. And around 1998, some environmental clubs sued EPA in Florida and said, you never did this program you're supposed to do. And they were right. And so EPA said, okay, we'll do it. And it's partly called TMDL, Total Maximum Daily Load. This is something every community works on. A guy like me, identifying which water bodies are polluted. You can look on the state website and find that they are very common. And every community has a lot of impaired waters because there's a lot of pollution out there. It's not, fish can't live everywhere. So instead of saying what's bad about EPA, I'd like to say that they have some really great ideas and they do some great work. They're not perfect. Just like me, just like you, not perfect. But they need support to get work done. And I recommend that you support environmental programs rather than run them down for their imperfections. You know, think hard about if you had to do it, what would you do? And put yourself in the driver's seat. How would you fix it? Nothing imaginary, something real. And EPA, not perfect, but they've done a lot of good work. A lot of hazardous waste sites have been cleaned up. Air pollution is less than it used to be. They're not perfect, but they've done a lot.
More, the EPA, isn't really the issue. What the issue is, the EPA being sliced and diced when it comes to funding. I'll give you a quick example. 2013, I went to an EPA meeting where they literally asked the people in attendance, which was about 4 people back then, and they were asking us for their help if we seen anything to call them because they're so underfunded, undermanned, that they can't do the jobs that are asking the citizens to do it.
Whoever might want to take this one, it's short and to the point. How long for the sea life to come back?
Well, it's amazing how quickly the sea life comes back after a red tide. Whenever the water clears up. As a matter of fact, good news, we've been having millions of cells per liter in New Pass, and today there was 0. So maybe we're on the right track. We'll see what happens on Monday. But anyway, it's amazing. The shellfish, the clams, and the oysters, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for them to clean up, and then the state has to test to make sure that they're safe. But we've noticed after a severe red tide, it doesn't take long the next day. In the days as it's waning, you start to see schools of little fish and fish coming back in. So, there's been a tremendous mass of fish deaths during this one. So I don't know how quickly it's going to happen. But
We lost a lot of fish and it's serious damage, but I'm already seeing bait fish, mackerel, jacks, and even a few snook and snapper showing up in Lemon Bay. 2 weeks ago, everything was dead. I'm not telling you that this is over with, but I'm telling you there is life there again this week, and God only knows what it'll be tomorrow. But fish do bounce back a lot quicker than we really think. Migratory fish move in, and it's a mess, and it's going to be a while to recover, but it's not a total disaster yet.
I'd like to jump in real quick and say, there needs to be a place where nature can live. And if we just build everything, you say the fish are coming back, and they are, and the shellfish are coming back, but as time moves on and there are more and more people, I really think we should give some thought to having places where nature can survive, and then, because we're going to have red tide, and we need them to be able to come back from some sort of enclave that is safe for nature. And we haven't talked about that a lot, but I think it's really, really important. The oceans have a lot less fish in them than they used to, a lot less. And nature is kind of struggling. So as a citizen, I would recommend that you support, protection for natural reserves and things like that, because these fish have to come from somewhere. We've got the Everglades, we've got some places, but I don't think we can build everywhere and still expect it to rebound.
talking about the restoration, it's critical, and I'm so excited that you people are here, and I appreciate the passion of the speakers and the knowledge and the hard work that you all are doing. But unfortunately, whenever the nature returns to what we might call normal, people just forget about it. And this is important not to forget about it. Keep your passion, keep your grassroots groups going. And let's get this done together.
How do we stop Charlotte County from spraying aqua Roundup in our retention ponds? This is from Linda Moston. Did I get that name right?
I spaced out for a second. What?
How do we stop from spraying Roundup? Man, that's an easy one.
How do you stop Charlotte County from spraying Roundup in the retention ponds?
Oh, just have Charlotte County stop spraying Roundup. Got any more brain busters?
Stop, Charlotte County.
I'm sorry, Mike. Can we get his mic back on? He had something to add there.
What we're seeing also is why are we trying to bring in duckweed implementation when you guys have been spending millions of dollars spraying it all to death year to year? Maybe we wouldn't have an algae problem. Like I said, I'd rather have a duckweed problem.
Also, we've got a really big problem in the Kissimmee chain and Lake Okeechobee with them spraying pesticides. I mean, spraying weed killer to kill the water hyacinths.
Okay, we've got a question here from Margaret A. Hackett, Cape Hayes Marina in Englewood. Besides recycling and cleaning up dead fish, what can we do personally to help get rid of the red tide? Thank you.
What we can do, like I said in the beginning, we learn from our mistakes. We learn history. And my grandpa once told me that a smart man learns from his mistakes, but a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. We need to remember, what can we do right now? Let our kids learn with us. You know, that's why I love seeing these little ones out here in the crowd. What we can do now, stop fertilizing your lawns. 80% of fertilizer in the state of Florida is leached. I don't know if you guys noticed, but you kind of live in a rainforest here. So when 80% of fertilizer is leached, that's not good. You know, and when I said that the farmers, they follow certain laws that give them that 70% better environmentally. However, I've also worked on landscape crews in my day. And old Miss Smith, man, she's a hag. And if her grass isn't green enough, she'll find somebody else to do it. And I've got kids to feed. You know, so I throw a couple extra pounds of fertilizer on there. You know, nobody is taking an account of ourselves in our own yards, our own septic leaks, different things like that. When I look at these canals in Cape Coral that are suffering, I can't also help notice green grass sloping down into the canals. Have you guys ever seen it rain in Florida? It happens a lot. You know, the point is it's not Hector's fault. It's not Miss Smith's fault. It's not my fault. You know, when we get to talking to one another like we're doing right now, we get to say like, man, David, whose idea was it to grow green grass instead of food? You know, population's a problem, starvation's a problem, and yet we're sitting here watering and fertilizing fake grass instead of growing our own food. It's called eat local and eat seasonal, guys.
And just on a state level, shouldn't we just do this all organic, number one? Make everything organic. And then wouldn't it be better that way, number one? Number two, spot fertilize. Scientific American said if we spot fertilize versus just massive fertilization, much better idea. And number three, some people don't like to hear this, but Monsanto is not helping us here. So I've got peanut and cotton farmer in-laws. My family are farmers up in the Panhandle. And they're not helping our whole situations from where we are, from not only fertilization, but the whole seed situation. So that's the big picture there.
Two things to think about real quick, like first off, we're wasting half of our drinking water on our lawns and landscaping, and that's something we need to do something about. We're gonna need that drinking water. On the subject of fertilizer and agriculture, they have a best management practice now where they try to keep they water the fertilizer in instead of just putting it in ahead of the rain and hoping it gets washed in. Because if it gets below the root system, it's wasted money. And business has gotten very efficient at trying to keep from wasting money because they have to.
Thank you, and I just want to take a check here on our time. Kurt, we have to wrap up as close to 9 as possible, correct? All right, we've got just a couple of questions left then. Could our dirty water be related to the Southwest Florida childhood cancer cluster? 36% are more likely to have cancer.
Was that a fact? I mean, these are actual, statistical data-ridden facts that children that live below, south of Lake Okeechobee have a better chance of contracting cancer.
I had a lady tonight point out to me that in Placida, in the old days when the phosphate trains used to come through there, they weren't covered up and they were literally glowing green at night. And we had a lot of problem with cancer with folks that lived in Placida right by where the train came all the time.
Okay, we've got 2 questions left, everybody. What was the result of the necropsy on the whale shark that washed ashore? What was the result of the necropsy? Anybody heard anything yet?
I haven't.
Oop, there it is. I'm learning. I didn't get to see the actual report, but I did talk to a few other scientists that said that it was a combination of toxicity as well as oxygen depletion, which you're gonna see both of those kind of roll hand in hand typically when you have some kind of an issue like that. I'm not sure if it was the brevetoxins that they're referring to. One thing that I do want to say, guys, is brevetoxin is kind of a good toxin, the red tide toxin. And when I call it good, it's because it's detectable. When you get out there to the water and your eyes are burning, and the back of your throat feels bad, and you can feel it in your lungs, that common sense thing should come in, saying, hey, don't get in the water. Now the BMAAs, those are completely different than the brevetoxins. BMAA is a toxin found in cyanobacteria. It was found as a eureka moment, just like Dr. David Vaughn's moment with Mote Marine Labs. It was a complete accident. What they were doing is like what John was saying with work with ALS. They linked up BMAA with cyanobacteria. There's no reason to want to move out of Florida. We're even finding BMAA cyanobacteria in the desert. So there's a lot of studies being done now. It's pretty wild. It says that we don't really understand this. And John, as you were saying earlier, we're seeing experiences all around the world. I've gotten calls from Japan. I've gotten calls from all kinds of countries. And one thing that we also need to keep in mind, it's getting hot, dudes. It's not in our head. It's called global warming. With that comes ocean acidification. You know, when I talked about those greenhouse gases, when I was an algae scientist in college, I preferred to grow algae in a greenhouse. The reason why is because the production rate, it grows faster. So if we implemented greenhouse gases versus CFCs since the 90s, we've essentially turned Earth into a greenhouse-like state. That's why we call them greenhouse gases. So when people start wondering, you know, you're dead on point with nutrient pollution also rises. Why? Population. Every child born is not born with 35 square farmable acres. That's why there are monsters out there like Monsanto. You know, when I went to work for them, I went to meet the devil. Never met the devil. Just met a bunch of frustrated scientists trying to figure out how they were going to feed you all before you started a war against yourselves fighting over the last cow. So we have a population problem. We don't really have a Monsanto problem. If we could teach each other that maybe we should slow down on our breeding, those guys would be more than happy to slow down on the corn growing, believe me.
I couldn't agree more with Garrett. 1,000 people moving to Florida per day, that includes us. One thing I want to point out is the state has a responsibility also with that amount of people moving here and us being a part of the problem. I point the finger at the South Florida Water Management District for not, upgrading our infrastructure with the influx of these people.
Right?
We've come to our final question. It's a loaded one, so be ready on the mics over there, because anybody that wants to sort of chime in on this one. What is being done to restore the natural flow of the Everglades?
South Florida Water Management's been working on some projects on this since the Bush administration, Jeb Bush. And they're looking at several things. One of the ones that they think that will take the least land and do the most good is deep well injections of the water. Again, shoot the messenger if you want, but I'm just telling you what they're trying to do and what their thoughts are. I'm answering the question. I personally believe we definitely need to restore the sheet flow of the Everglades, but that's not a simple thing, and it's not going to happen overnight. And they are raising a great deal of 41. You got to remember, when they built 41, the Tamiami Trail and then the Alligator Alley, they dammed off a lot of natural flow there too. We built the dike, that dammed it off and created all the dry land below that. And you've been building these problems for a long time. It's not going to be anything that you can just quickly fix, and it's not going to just go away.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, he's absolutely correct. SEP and SERP are a very intricate, system that is shared through state and federal levels. A lot of people should look into SEP and SERP, and understand how this intricate system works. But, the reality is, I'm going back to the point, when it comes to water sending south, what good is the notion if we can't meet the Miccosukee tribe's standards?
Right?
Anyone else on the panel care to chime in, or?
I'll always add something. John, we could be BFFs, huh? We always have something else to say. I would like to add, I heard somebody in the crowd say, stop building. And I'd like to talk about opinions real quick, because opinions are opinions. And I think that your line that marks the Everglade is your opinion. As far as we say, oh, well, this mall's getting awfully close to the Everglades. Now, technically, they're saying what I've heard, that this mall will be 5 miles outside of the Everglades. What I'm saying is I think that you made your line wrong a long time ago. You guys ever heard of the line between the United States and Mexico? It's not real. It's made up. So when we look at some of our old maps of Florida, the lines that we call the Everglades are not the same lines that Florida calls the Everglades. So we need to start working a little bit more with nature instead of our convenience with nature.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank all of you. We'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight, for coming out, for everyone who submitted questions. I'd like to thank our panel, our speakers, everybody that exhibited for us this evening. I'd like to thank the coffee and water provisioners,